Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have you on today. Thank you for joining us near and far. We're going to give everyone some time to get in and get settled, but welcome to From Small Beginnings to Great Heights, Children's Savings Accounts, Phenomenal Growth. We're so excited for you to join us today. This webinar will go from 3 to 4, and as we get started, I would like to start off with the introduction of myself. I am Jalacia Lewis, a Senior Program Associate at Prosperity Now. So excited to be with you all today. And let's talk a little bit about what to expect from this call, what to get out of this call on today. So we're hoping that you are joining from a quiet space. Feel free to grab some coffee, a snack as you all come in and get settled. Feel free to engage with us. We want to hear from you, although we won't hear from you per se through the screens. We want to see your questions. We want to answer your questions. We want to engage with you with your comments, and we want you to reflect on what you've learned, reflect on what you have read in the report, our findings, and we want to take away some things from the webinar on today. And next slide. So some housekeeping. A lot of you are familiar with GoToWebinar, but just in case this is your first time joining us, this webinar is being recorded. After the call, it will be emailed to registrants within a week. All of your mics are muted, so you don't have to worry about that, just to ensure sound quality. Feel free to ask, as I mentioned, anytime throughout the webinar. Feel free to ask a question, share your thoughts. You can do so by typing it into the text box in the chat on your panel. And then if you are experiencing any technical issues, please feel free to email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. Next slide. So, Prosperity Now, who are we? What do we do? Prosperity Now's mission is to build an economy that is just, fair, and free from structural racism, where every person, family, and community has the power to build sustainable wealth and prosperity. So for today's agenda, I've already went over the welcome and housekeeping. As I mentioned, we're so excited to have you. We're going to be discussing the findings from the State of the Field report that recently went out. We're also going to have a group discussion and Q&A, and then we'll close with next steps and some resources for you to look further into. So on the next slide, get excited. We're going to have a quick poll. What type of entity do you represent? Please select all that apply. You will see that now on your screen. And we just want to learn more about you. We want to see who's here, who's in this space today. So please select one or other. And I'm going to give you all some time to do so. So no rush, take your time. All right, the poll has closed. Okay, so we have a good amount of new comers here who are learning more about CSAs, which is great. We're going to have a lot of information on today's webinar. We have a lot of CSA practitioners. Hello, welcome, good to see you and meet you again. We have 16% that are policymakers, advocates, or funders, and 6% of researchers. So thank you for joining this space with us. And then we have 11% other. We're excited to see what that other breaks down to and what that looks like. Next slide. So for today's speakers, we have Aaron Thiemann and Noah Lightman, who are on the screen, so welcome. Aaron Thiemann is a senior program manager on the Ecosystems Change team. In this role, she provides technical assistance to communities in designing children's savings account programs. Prior to joining Prosperity Now, Aaron was a program manager at the City of St. Louis Treasurer's Office of Financial Empowerment, where she managed the CalKIDS program, a citywide savings account initiative. Welcome, Aaron. We also have Noah Lightman, who we'll be hearing from later today in the webinar. He's the program manager of Children's Savings Account Initiatives with the Scholar Share Investment Board, the state agency that administers California's Scholar Share 529 College Savings Plan. In this role, he oversees the development and implementation of California's statewide CSA program, the California Kids Investment and Development Savings Program. He also manages Scholar Share 529's partnership with CSA programs across the country. Thank you both so much for joining us today. We are going to get started with Aaron, and Aaron, take it away. We'll talk with you later, Noah.
Thanks, Jalecia. And on the next slide, we're going to get started and dig into some of the findings from our new report. So you all are here to learn about the state of the children's savings field in 2022. You can go on to the next slide, Laura. So we have a new report out. It's called the Multiplying Movement, and you will see why in just a few minutes. There is a link on this slide, but you can also access this report in the handout section of GoToWebinar. There's a handout that says CSA State of the Field Report. It's also available on our website, and I'm sure that someone on our team will drop it in the chat throughout. We want to make sure you guys get a chance to read about all of the exciting things that are happening in the CSA world. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about the report and about the findings you'll hear today. So we conduct a CSA survey every year to gather data about what's going on in programs, how many kids and families they're serving, and to learn more about what's happening on the ground in the CSA world. I've now used the acronym CSA probably about 6 or 7 times already, so I want to do some context and level setting, especially since we have lots of folks here based on the poll that are here to learn more about CSAs. So CSA stands for Children's Savings Account, and now I can go back to using the acronym. And at Prosperity Now, in order to qualify to have your data included in our survey and in this report, you need to be doing a couple of things as a CSA program. These programs look very different, but at a fundamental level, they include all of these criteria. So CSAs are long-term savings or investment accounts and serve children 0 to 18. They're used for an asset building purpose, usually post-secondary education, although we do have programs that allow for other asset building purposes such as homeownership or entrepreneurship. One key difference between a CSA and a child savings account or a junior account your family may open at a bank or credit union is that CSA programs provide contributions to build savings. So you're not in this alone. There's a program that's here to help boost your balances, whether through a seed deposit, matches, or other type of program contributions. Generally, CSA programs restrict account withdrawals for that asset building purchase, such as post-secondary education. And finally, in order to be included in this data set, CSA programs need to have had enrolled participants by the end of December. So any programs that are in planning, you're not going to see yourselves in this data, but we will follow up with you. And when we do this survey next year, that's when we will include programs that are in planning. So you need to be in operation in order to be a part of this data set. We fielded a survey from October to December of 2022, and responses cover about 56% of active programs. For the programs where we do not have survey responses, we included data from a combination of public information and our great partners at IERE, at Brandeis. There's some other organizations like a Michigan CSA coalition. There's some other folks that have helped share this data to give us a more complete picture of what the CSA field looks like, as well as pulling data from previous year's surveys. So that's the how of the report, and now let's get into what we learned. So very excited to report as of the end of December of 2022, there are 128 active programs across the country, ranging in size from 24 kids to 3.4 million kids, which you'll hear more from Noah about in a little bit. As you can see, dating back to 2007 with the very first CSA demonstration project, the field has blossomed from one program to 128 programs. As you can see from this graph here, the field shows no sign of slowing down soon. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about where we've come from. So Prosperity Now began conducting our annual CSA program survey in 2016. And in 2016, this is what the state of the field looked like across the country. You can see the key in this graph, a darker color of red is more programs, lighter color is less, and gray states are states without CSA programs. So in 2016, even though the field was still pretty young, we had a strong mix of programs across states. California was leading the way, along with Massachusetts with 5 programs respectively. As you can see, CSA programs covered a broad range of geographic regions and political affiliations. Now on the next slide, we see how the field has grown. So Laura, if you want to give me one more like flip back and forth, just so everyone can really understand and see how much the field has grown in a short number of years. So now we're in 2022, which is when our data was collected. We now have programs in 38 states plus DC, and we can see the number of programs have increased across these states as well. So leading the pack with California and Indiana. So Indiana has 23 programs that operate county by county. California has 18 programs and Michigan has 16 active programs. If you are joining this webinar from one of the states that is not a lovely shade of pink or red, we're so glad you're here and we would love to support you in bringing CSAs to your state. There are some states that have pending legislation. There are some states that have legislation that is passed but not funded. But we're really excited to see this map grow and change over time. And all of you that are joining this webinar are either running a CSA program or interested in bringing one to your community. So we're really astounded and continually humbled by the power of this movement going back since 2016. So on the next slide, we will talk about how many children and youth are being served by CSA programs. So we see an even more dramatic story of growth in the number of programs when we're looking at the number of kids served by these CSA programs. Almost 5 million children have a CSA as of the end of 2022. The field has grown more than 10 times its original size in the last 5 years. If you look at 2018 on this graph right here, we have 457,000. And I was around in the CSA world at that time, and I remember thinking, this is such a huge number, almost 500,000 kids. And now we have programs that are enrolling 500,000 kids every year. So 4,911,000 is a really exciting number to see, and it just shows how much CSAs have grown and how the idea of investing in children and youth has continued to multiply over time. As you will hear later in our discussion with Noah Lightman from CalKIDS, the astronomical growth this year, going from 1.2 million to 4.9 million, has been driven largely by one new program launching, which is the CalKIDS program, a statewide program in California. So you'll hear more about that program later, but that is the largest driver of this dramatic increase, as well as well-established automatic enrollment programs that are continuing to enroll large cohorts of children and youth, whether it's Pennsylvania's program enrolling about 100,000 kids a year, down to our citywide school district partnerships that are enrolling between 10 and 50,000 a year. We continue to see sustained growth in the number of kids and youth that are being served by this program. And we, a couple of years ago, started including the "and youth" to participating children and youth, because we now have our very first cohort of a citywide program in San Francisco that has kids graduating from high school this year and are going on to college. So we will need to start saying children, youth, young adults. And there are other programs that have served young adults and high school age students, but the primary population for CSAs are young children and their families. So we're excited to see the continued growth. And now we'll get into a little bit more about what these programs are hoping to achieve. Awesome, thanks, Laura. So CSA programs look really different, but they all have a couple of things in common. And so one of the questions that we ask in our survey is asking about top 3 program goals. And we ask programs to rank their goals in order of importance to them. What's their North Star, despite these programs looking quite different on the ground? And once again, this trend has been consistent through every year that we have collected data. Increasing the number of young people who complete college or career training remains the highest ranked goal of CSA programs. As you can see, 51% of our survey respondents selected this as their #1 goal, and another 18 and 15% ranked it in their top 3. So increasing college enrollment, career training, and getting folks ready for their future is the #1 goal. Secondly, we see promoting economic mobility and or asset building for young people is also a popular goal. And about a quarter of programs say that this is their top goal. We see this more often in CSA programs that are situated or located inside of programs that house an Office of Financial Empowerment or offer other financial capability services. Something that we added as an option for goals a couple of years ago is this 4th option down here, decreasing racial inequities in educational attainment. We saw a slight drop off this year compared to last year about the importance of decreasing racial inequality in educational attainment, but we do see it as a consistent goal. It's just usually not the top rated goal, as you can see from the data here. So despite programmatic differences, where these programs are located, increasing the number of young people who are able to thrive in their future through college or career training remains a constant goal across all programs. On the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about how programs are supporting their participants in growing their accounts. So as I mentioned on a previous slide, all CSA programs offer some type of additional funding or support to help participants grow their balances, because we know that all families are not going to be able to save for the entire cost of college on their own. And so programs design ways to build those account balances. The most common way here is through a seed deposit or an initial deposit. This is that starting amount that CSA programs provide to all participants to get their accounts started. 89% of participants receive an initial deposit, and that initial deposit ranges in size. The most common seed deposit amount is $50, and we see $100 is the second most common amount, and But we do see a range from $5 up through $1,500 as the initial deposit for these programs. The next type of contribution here is benchmark contribution. If you could go back one slide, Laura. Thanks. Benchmark contributions are ways to add to accounts that are not related to a savings match or deposit activity, but are related to completing milestones. So common examples here include adding $10 to a child's account on their 10th birthday, or adding $5 to a participant's account whose parent or guardian participates in financial coaching. So some ideas and options to help families boost their account balances without deposit related activity. So we're getting closer to the halfway point of programs that offer benchmark contributions. We continue to see this grow in popularity really over the past 3 or 4 years. We expect that increase to continue. The slightly less than that, about 36% of programs offer a savings match. So this is a match dollar for dollar, usually up to a certain amount, that is designed to incentivize participants and their families to make deposits or make contributions. This number is down quite a ways from a couple of years ago, and we expect to see the savings match continue to decline in popularity as we see more support and more best practices shared around other more inclusive and less regressive deposit options. We see deposit bonus and prize link savings. These are all here to show you that CSAs have a lot of really creative ways to help boost those account balances and help participants grow assets for their future. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about demographics. Awesome, thanks. And just a reminder, Laura just dropped this in the chat, but if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat anytime. If you're like, Erin, I would love to learn more about finding you just shared, or this is cool, how do I bring this to my community? All questions are good questions, and we will have some time for Q&A at the end, but go ahead and drop your questions in now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about targeted contributions and demographics. At Prosperity Now, we are always thinking about how to sharpen our focus on racial equity and how to support particularly participants of color who have historically faced greater barriers in accumulating savings. And so one of the things we began tracking a couple of years ago is asking our CSA programs whether or not they provide targeted contributions. And so there are a couple of different ways in which programs can provide targeted benefits to particularly low-income participants or participants of color. And we really see this as a promising way to make sure that your CSA program is providing the most resources to the families who are most in need and making sure that higher income, higher resource families are not benefiting more than lower income families from your CSA program. So to answer that question, we asked our CSA programs that are currently in operation about their targeted benefits. And what we found is that about 41% of programs have targeted benefits, and programs can have more than one type of benefit. And so those are the figures that you see below. So for example, 42% of the programs who have targeted benefits restrict their eligibility to low-income households. So whether this is a statewide matching grant program that restricts participation to below a certain income, or whether it's like the case of Atlanta, a CSA program that launched this past year that eligibility is restricted to kindergarten students in Title I schools. There are a couple of different ways that programs have sought to make sure that their eligibility is restricted to participants that would benefit the most. There are also ways that universal programs offer additional contributions or benefits to participants from low-income households. So about 4% of participants of programs have universal programs, but they have a savings match that's restricted to low-income households. So everyone's in the program, but you get an extra boost or extra dollars sent your way if your family qualify as low or moderate income, depending on how the program is structured. The last one here is also pretty popular. 33% of programs that have targeted benefits provide additional deposits for participants who are from either low-income households or attend a school with predominantly low-income students. So we have seen this in a couple of programs that offer a bonus if your child qualifies for free and reduced lunch, or if your child attends a school that is listed by the district as high priority for student equity or based on student need. And we're really encouraged by this data around targeted benefits. We believe that universal programs offer a lot of great benefits, and we like to see additional targeting of benefits, contributions, and resources toward participants who are from low to moderate income households and are participants of color. What we have seen in the data is that offering additional benefits based on race and ethnicity has been challenging for programs from a legal perspective, from a data sharing perspective. And so we see this income as a more common proxy in this scenario. Something else that we ask in our survey that we've been asking for a long time is trying to get a sense of who is being served by CSA programs. And what we found based on our data, we asked participants in our survey to estimate the percentage of their participants that are from low to moderate income backgrounds. And then we asked them how they're defining low to moderate income. And what we found in our data is that 3.6 million participants are from low to moderate income families, which is more than 73% of CSA holders. On the one hand, this is really encouraging data to see. We're really excited to learn more about who is being served by CSA programs. And if we look at data from the early days of college savings, whether it was through an individual 529 or a Coverdell account, what we saw in the data is that college savings was mostly benefiting high income, white, highly resourced families. So we're really encouraged to see how many low to moderate income participants or participants from low to moderate income families are being served by CSA programs. The challenge to this data is we're seeing more and more, especially across universal programs, that too many families are low to moderate income. And so we at Prosperity Now have a lot of thinking to do and collaboration with our policy team to help support those families. This is especially true in programs in large urban school districts that partner with a CSA program where we are just continuing to see high percentage of students or participants that qualify for free and reduced lunch or other means tested barriers. So we're really excited to see how the CSA population or how CSA programs are reaching low to moderate income populations, and we hope in future years to be able to share even more detailed data about the demographics of who's being served. On this next slide, I want to talk briefly about limitations of this report and of the data. So the first thing to note is race and ethnicity data is not found in our report, and nor was it shared in the findings today. Race and ethnicity data is something that continues to be a challenge for CSA programs themselves to be able to report on it. Every year, we're inching closer to a representative sample in our data, but the responses that we got this year were not representative of program enrollment, although we are seeing progress. The second thing to note here in our limitations is that our household income data, while we have better access to income proxies and asked programs to provide that, whether it's free or reduced price lunch status, or whether programs are sharing an income limit or using area median income, we don't have a consistent definition across CSA programs about what low to moderate income means. So we just need to be really broad and careful about our terms when we're sharing findings outside of this context, and know that programs, when they're talking to each other, might be referring to a different income band if they're talking about low to moderate income versus using area median income when they're talking about their program. So just something to keep in mind when we're thinking about how CSA programs talk to each other, and how when you're reading an annual report or some other data from a CSA program, to keep the demographics in mind when you're thinking about your own community. The other limitation is this survey is a snapshot in time. We don't have 100% response, and we have new programs popping up all the time. And so our survey closed in December of 2022. That 4.9 million is undoubtedly higher because we are now 4 months into the year. So just to keep in mind that this is a snapshot of the field, and we will update our findings on an annual basis. And so with that, I am actually going to move us into conversation with the driver of this incredible growth in the CSA field this year. And I'm really happy to be in conversation with Noah Lightman from CalKIDS. But before him and I talk, I'm going to welcome Noah back to the conversation to tell us all about his program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erin and Jalacia and Shira, and just the entire team at Prosperity Now for all the work that you all do, reaching out to all the various CSA programs across the country to be able to gather this research, and so that we as practitioners in the field, academics, policymakers, and anyone else can take a more holistic approach at, are CSAs working? What are they doing? Especially since these are, in a way, newer programs. We really appreciate just all the work on the back end that Prosperity Now does to explain the importance of these programs. And I'm also thankful for the opportunity to present a little bit about CalKIDS. As I was introduced earlier, my name's Noah Lightman. I work for the Scholarshare Investment Board. We're an independent state agency that's overseen by State Treasurer Fiona Ma in the state of California. And our primary mission is to administer the state's 529 college savings plan, Scholarshare 529, but we have the distinct pleasure of administering this new program called CalKIDS, and I'm excited to share a little bit about that with you all today. Next slide, please. So the purpose of CalKIDS was, how do we create something that provides greater access to higher education for as many kids throughout the state as possible? Also, how do we look at helping parents or guardians start to build assets and have a starting point for their child's, career development or their education future, as we know that higher education is a great equalizer and people need that initial start in order to get there. In general, how do we want to, as a state, increase the number of low-income students pursuing post-secondary education? In California, there's a lot of different initiatives that's been done and still in the works around how do we expand access specifically for low-income students, whether it's making community college free, trying to reduce the cost of textbooks, adding more funds for our state Cal Grant program, but one of the things too that we wanted to do is, how do we support an environment that fosters financial literacy and encouraging families to save on their own through the broader value of higher education? So here you'll see on the screen a picture of the governor and our team at the Scholarshare Investment Board creating the first CalKIDS accounts, as this is an initiative that is near and dear to Governor Gavin Newsom's heart on making sure that families and students have a way to start saving for higher education. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of how CalKIDS came about. Next slide, please. So CalKIDS was structured in the following ways. Back in 2019, and maybe we can keep clicking the slides for a few minutes, for a few moments. Yeah, if you just go all the way through. And I'll tell you right there, stop right there, awesome. So, back one. So back in 2019, the state of California said, hey, we love this concept of children's savings accounts so much. Let's devote a small state budget allocation to create a program for every newborn in the state. So what happened is in 2019, the state of California gave $25 million to create a new program called CalKIDS that would serve every newborn born in the state. Then, as you can imagine, a pandemic struck. So we were all scrambling. What are we going to do? Is this program does this program have the resources and the capability to launch? And we were trying to prop the program with the limited resources. But with 450,000 newborns in the state and $25 million in a one-time allocation, that wasn't really a whole lot of money. And so in 2021, Governor Newsom and the legislature said, hey, we love this concept so much, let's expand it to also include low-income public school students. So we had 1 year to put the whole program together. It's essentially two components between newborns and students with this one CalKIDS label that we formally launched in August of 2022. So how is it structured? Every newborn born on or after July 1st of 2022 gets up to $100. We start them out with $25 in a CalKIDS account. If the parent logs on and views their account, we give them another $25. And if the parent shows that they're saving on their own by creating a ScholarShare 529 account, we give them $50. So $100 right there. And then for low-income students, what we do is we say, no, $100 isn't enough. We give them actually $500. And if they're identified as either a foster youth or homeless, we give them another $500. And so for the small handful of students that were identified as foster and homeless, we give them actually $1,500. And so how the program is structured is the first year's cohort is students who were 1st through 12th grade in the last academic year in public schools who were identified as low income. So when Aaron was talking before about 3.4 million kids that were added to the Prosperity Now research report to show that big spike in CSA participation, that's essentially what we're talking about. These are 3.4 million kids who were in 1st through 12th grade last year. So now they may be in 2nd grade through college freshmen and already using their CalKIDS accounts. And the idea is that in subsequent years, we're going to continue adding low-income 1st graders into the program. So newborns, regardless of the family's income, and low-income 1st graders in subsequent years will get that $500. Next slide, please. So now that we've launched this program, let's talk a little bit about what we've learned. As of March 21st, we've had over 100,000 people register. This means that they've somehow heard about the program and they found the information in order to log on and view their account. The task that we're left with at the ScholarShare Investment Board, so we've got about 3.4 million students, and we've got, however many newborns have been born up to this point, to let them know, hey, we've created CalKIDS accounts for you. All you need to do is go online and view the account because this is just free money for you. So over 100,000 people have done that since we launched in August. We've also been making distributions to over 11,000 students. So of the money that we've had invested in these accounts, we've already sent out $5.6 million to students as just extra money for higher education. And not only that, as Aaron was talking about before, we need mechanisms for families to continue saving. And so we do that through the ScholarShare 529 plan. What a participant can do is they can view on their portal an individual ScholarShare 529 account, as well as their CalKIDS account in one place, so that they can keep adding money to their ScholarShare account and they see the state investment all in one place. And we've had over 9,000 participants create and link a ScholarShare 529 account. Now, what do we do next? This is our first year of the program being in operation, and our number one priority is how do we increase brand recognition? There's a few different ways that we're doing that. We're sending out letters to all participants for whom we've received data for, letting them know, hey, you are eligible for the CalKIDS program. You have an account that's just sitting and waiting for you. Go register. Here's how you do it. We're also working with schools, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and more to engage families. And how do we do that? We've been doing a lot of workshops, outreach events, especially webinars, just kind of like these. But we also have tried to make it really easy for organizations to plug and play materials through our online digital toolkit, which can be found at calkids.org. And we have content like flyers, social media tools, newsletter content that any organization can pull from and easily, just post a flyer on their campus or site so that people can see, hey, this is a real program. There's free money out there for you. We just, need partners' help in making sure that people know that these accounts exist. So with that, again, really want to appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about CalKIDS, and I think I'll turn it back over to Aaron as we're going to answer some questions now.
Thanks, Noah. And I have a couple questions for you before we move into Q&A, but I just want to send a reminder to our audience. If you have any questions for myself or for Noah, please drop them in the chat. I am so grateful for you sharing the data, Noah, about some of your success so far, especially around account registration, disbursement requests. This challenge for anyone who's currently operating a CSA program. This is the first challenge that programs encounter, right? How do we get the word out? So the fact that you have had 100,000 account registrations in year one of your launch just speaks to the momentous effort that it takes to stand up a program like this. So I'm really encouraged to hear those numbers, and I'm curious to hear questions from the audience about how you guys achieve this. So my first question to you, Noah, is could you talk about your biggest takeaways from your planning and launch process? And in particular, I'm curious about what you've learned from other programs in the field, what you've learned from the California Coalition. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. As a big statewide program, you had the opportunity to learn from not just statewide programs, but from 17 other programs in California. So what were your biggest takeaways from your planning process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, you mentioned a year in, we're not even a year in yet, and so we're excited to see all the progress that we're going to make as the months continue going on, especially as we continue sending out notification letters. I think that there's a few different elements to this. From an outreach and engagement perspective, it's really important to work with schools, nonprofits, government agencies to get the message out. Fortunately, SIB, the Scholarship Investment Board, has over 20 years of experience working with partner organizations in all 58 counties in California. And we have an established reputation of helping families save for college at all income levels in helping families prepare for higher education. But we're a small team, and the more partners we have supporting this effort really helps us raise that brand awareness that I was talking about a moment ago. And then from an administrative standpoint, there's a lot of different components ranging from data management to customer service and the contracts. With a small staff, it's a lot to manage. So it is really important to develop clear expectations and deliverables as we put these programs together. But as we talk about our learnings, most importantly, I want to give a special shout out and thank you as we talk about research to all the work that researchers like Willie Elliott and Michael Sherraden and Margaret Clancy at the Center for Social Development at WashU in St. Louis do, that really have taken a close look at all the, and what Prosperity Now is doing, of course, all the close look at all the different program components of a CSA that really helped us think about, okay, what are other program's doing and how can we relate that to what we're doing with CalKIDS. And so, this inspired the structure to offer really a substantial initial deposit, as you saw with that $500 deposit, but also provide another opportunity for families to continue saving on their own. There's no program in the country that's quite as comparable to CalKIDS. And I say that because we're a statewide program, but we also reach a participant group ranging from newborns to students who are already in college already. I also want to thank Benita Melton and the Mott Foundation for connecting us with different CSA practitioners across the country. We've gleaned lessons around engagement from states like Pennsylvania, Nebraska, Maine, on how they communicate with new parents, particularly through communication letters. I was talking before about sending out notification letters. That's something that we're not the first CSA program to do that. We recognize whenever we send those out, we have a larger spike in people who are registering, which is great. And then, as we talk about in California, all the local CSAs that we have here and we do great work with, they are exceptional at engaging families at a more community-oriented level. But the biggest takeaways that we have are really how do we work with schools and organizations in the community that are very connected to families and students on a day-to-day basis, and how can we work with them to promote the programs? And that's what we try to continue to do county by county.
Great, thank you for such a thoughtful response. It's really encouraging to me. I started in the CSA field a long time ago, and the process you're describing about reaching out to other programs, learning what works, and also learning what didn't make it into the report, the ideas and initiatives that were tried and lessons learned the hard way. So we're always really happy to see that collaboration and sharing of knowledge has continued. So I'm going to give you one last question, and then I'm going to read some questions that have been coming in from the audience. So if you have any last questions you want to add to the chat, now is the time to do it. So Noah, you spoke about some other initiatives that are going on in California, not just CSA programs, although we know that there are a lot of CSA programs in the state. California has a long history of leading in the CSA movement. So we know that CSAs are not a silver bullet. Even at $1,500 is nowhere close to the amount of money that college costs, and we expect college costs to continue to rise. We know that CSA programs work best in coordination with other benefits, initiatives, and programs. I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on some programs, policies, or initiatives that you think align really well with CSAs, whether they're operated within California or in other communities that you think really complement CSAs and that you would like to see more of.
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question, Erin, because the CSA it's really just that seed. How do we encourage families to continue building assets in more ways? And the Scholarshare Investment Board, our small agency, we support tax credits and other scholarship opportunities that families can receive, to make sure that they get the most resources that are available. In terms of CSAs in particular, however, our agency and State Treasurer Fiona Ma has advocated for tax deductions when an individual contributes to an individual Scholarshare 529 account. Over 30 states in the country offer a full or a partial tax deduction or credit to contributing to that 529 plan, but California is behind in this space. And so if we were able to get some sort of additional tax benefit like a deduction or credit for the California Scholarshare 529 plan, I talked before about how 9,000 participants have already linked a Scholarshare 529 account, and there may be participants that haven't linked an account. If we have some additional tax benefit to encourage them to do that, I think that will encourage more families to save, especially lower income families that can use that the most.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think from our perspective at Prosperity Now, we would love to see that type of tax credit that was targeted or had income restrictions so that the most families with the smallest amount of resources are able to benefit the most from that type of tax credit. And I will also just add at PN, what we're really thinking about too are all of the ways that we can provide additional both asset and income supports to families. And I know that California has an expanded and statewide EITC program. We know that the child tax credit also plays a role in creating those windfall moments for families to be able to put something away for their child's future. And so I'm really interested to see where California goes in the world of one of the dozens of guaranteed income pilots that are happening in California and across the country, as well as calls for expanded child tax credit, and really thinking about how we can get more resources into the hands of families. And that's really great to hear that your office has been thinking about how do we make this more accessible and how do we create additional ways to get resources into families' hands. So I'm going to move us into some Q&A questions. Noah, this first one is for you. So with California having such a high number of undocumented families and or mixed status families, are undocumented children included in this program? And if so, how do you navigate those families not having a social security number or potentially ITIN?
Yeah, that's a great question. So undocumented participants can still be part of the CalKIDS program. We have taken information from for the low-income students from the California Department of Education, and they do not have that information on a social security number, ITIN, so that's not information that we can collect in the first place. But what we have done is we've put these participants in an omnibus account structure, and when it comes down to distribution, they are treated like an outside scholarship, and we do not request any sort of taxpayer identification information. But if the participant wishes to continue saving on their own through ScholarShare 529, because of federal law, they do need either a social security number or an individual taxpayer identification number. But to purely access the CalKIDS account and to use those funds, we don't require that.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. That's super helpful. And if whomever submitted this question, there are a lot of programs who have dealt with this question and have found ways to design their programs so that all participants can be included regardless of documentation status. So thank you, Noah, for that. And there's a follow-up question here that's related to account structure. So I will ask this now. Do most CSA programs allow family or parent contributions to the account owned by the nonprofit entity? So if you could explain how your structure works of where your program funds live and then how parents or family members are able to contribute.
Yeah, so the way that our program is structured is we at the state of California are technically the account owners. And so we put these accounts together and through an online portal, families can see their account that we have designated for them. And they can see, hey, this is $500 or $25 or $1,000 or however many. And that's just their CalKIDS account that they can see through going in this online portal. And we ask for some specified information for them to see their account. Then if they want to continue saving on their own, on the portal, it'll give them the option if they want to link a ScholarShare 529 account. And from there, they can press that. And we also have an instructional video in both English and Spanish that shows them how they can link it. And it'll take them to essentially create a new account, or if they have one already, they can put in their information for their existing ScholarShare 529 account. And then once all those steps are done, they can see their balances in one place. And if they want to continue adding to their ScholarShare 529 account, that would be done through the ScholarShare 529 website and their portal there as well. But the CalKIDS portal allows them to see both balances in one place.
Great, thank you for walking through that. And so as Noah just described, what families are seeing when they log in to check their account is just like you would look on your online banking. You can see multiple accounts and you can see that total balance. And then there are other programs that partner with a bank or credit union or some other type of financial institution in which participants are able to make contributions into an account, a custodial account that already exists. And again, as Noah is describing, what participants can see on the back end is all of their funds, even though they might not in actuality live in the same account, to make that process easier for families. And if anyone has any additional follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer those questions offline or connect you to programs to learn more about that account structure, because it is a very important question as you're developing your program and as you're thinking about how to communicate that with families. So I'm going to take this next question, and then Noah, I'll send it back over to you with a question about CalKIDS. So someone in the chat asked about the comment in reduction in programs with match savings and where we have seen this take place. So I'm happy to provide more context to that answer. So earlier on in the chat, or earlier on in the presentation, when we were talking about program contributions, also called incentives, we shared that match savings is dropping in popularity relative to other incentives. And so that is coming from a recognition of CSA programs in looking at savings matches as something that's potentially regressive, where we see that families who have more money to contribute to their child savings account are necessarily going to receive more funding or more resources from the program as they make those deposits. So for a low-income family, if they deposit $50 and the program has a savings match of $1 for dollar, they would get $50 from that program, giving them a balance of $100. For really high-income families who might be able to divert more of their income and assets toward college savings, this means that they may benefit more from a savings match than a lower income family. And so while we have seen very few programs drop a savings match, what we have seen more often is that when programs launch, they are not launching with a savings match, they're launching with some other deposit bonus. So what we've seen grow in more popularity over the past couple of years is moving to a flat deposit bonus. So for every deposit you make, you get $5, whether the deposit was $1 or $500, as a reward for the activity of the deposit match, rather than matching the savings themselves. So it's less about programs taking away their matches, although that has happened in a couple cases, and more about new programs launching with other types of incentives. And I'm going to move us into this last question so we can give Jalacia a minute to wrap us up at the end. So Noah, this is a question for you. So Noah, is there anything being done to rectify California families who must leave the state to access childbirth facilities? At this point, only babies in California are eligible for CalKIDS. However, we have several rural border counties who are accessing medical facilities in a neighboring state. Maybe you want to speak to what that first grade enrollment could look like as a catch-up opportunity.
Yeah, and that's a great question. You know, the program was designed based on funding. And the state said, you know, in California alone, there's approximately 450,000 births. And so, you know, that's, I can't say, you know, it was considered or not considered, you know, around births that are happen out of state, and we recognize that for rural families. But to Erin's point, you know, how the program is structured is such that when a child, especially children that are of most in need, who are low income, when they reach first grade, they're going to get $500 right there. So while there's not immediate plans to recapture those kids that were born in other states, the idea is that when they reach first grade, they'll have a CalKIDS account of $500.
Great, thanks so much, Noah. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jalacia. Before I do, I just want to thank Noah for joining me in conversation. It was really great to hear more about CalKIDS, and Olivia or someone on our team will drop the link to CalKIDS in the chat if you want to learn more. I just want to thank you, Noah, for sharing all of the great work your team has been doing, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Jalacia.
Thank you so much, Erin and Noah. Thank you, everyone who is still here with this webinar. So thank you so much for your participation, your questions. Thank you so much for filling out the program survey, which allowed us to bring this data to you on today. And thank you so much for sticking out with us this afternoon. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, we are asking that immediately following this webinar, you will receive a survey. Please fill it out. Let us know your feedback and suggestions for next time. Explore our many resources. A lot of links have been dropped in the chat, so feel free to check those out. Join our campaign for Every Kid's Future, which is linked as well, but also is on our website. And then also attend our upcoming webinars. We would love to see you again. Next slide. Finally, if you have not already, in case you missed it, we do have our State of the Children's Savings Field report out, the Multiplying Movement. Please check it out. There's a link in the chat, also is located on our website. We'd love for you to read that and to get more information about what we talked about on today. And finally, next slide, contact us. Feel free to reach out with any further questions that you have as we continue this conversation. We appreciate you so much for joining us. Thank you. And you all have a great day. Take care.